Peter, you might be the first person on this planet that has ever shut me up for this long. Good old Heraclitus, I tell you, that wild and crazy guy.
If I came to you and I gave you $10,000 for 20% of the company,
deal. Yeah. So, is that a verbal?
Younger than us, sorry to say, Joseph.
What, younger than 20?
Joe, we're just trying to help you because clearly you've lost control of the conversation.
I never, you know what? With all due respect, I never had control of the situation. Doesn't mean I'm gone. What doesn't kill me makes you stronger.
Look at you. You are insane.
How did I do that?
You're insane.
Well, hello, everybody. Happy Monday. It is December 21st. We are going from the cusp of Sagittarius to Capricorn. It is my birthday week. More on that shortly, but we have a great show. We have a great guest. We're going to move through this as quickly as we possibly can because there's just a lot of content to get through. Let's start off with a little bit of fat blogging. Fat blogging, what have we learned? We've learned that I managed to maintain 182.1 to 182.0. You can see that kind of plateau on the left. What you see is basically what my weight has looked like this whole year from the beginning of January, 205.5 to 182, over 20 pounds. Forget COVID-19. I've been COVID minus 19 and pretty happy about that. So there's something to look forward to, something to be positive about because it is National Look on the Bright Side. National Look on the Bright Side. The bright side of life, if you will. I would be, well, hello from the live, free or die state. That's got to be Maine, right? I'm just kidding, Chip. It's New Hampshire. I mean, yeah, it is New Hampshire. And Robert Collins is here. Good afternoon to you too. But it is National Look on the Bright Side of Life. And I'm just going to have to sing a song for you, right? As best as I can. Some things in life are bad. They can really make you mad. Other things just make you swear and curse. When you're chewing on life's gristle, don't grumble, give a whistle. And this'll help things turn out for the best. And always look on the bright side of life. Always look on the light side of life. I'm very happy that actually I was able to whistle because when I was practicing it, the whistling didn't exactly work out the way I wanted to. But it is about the bright side of life, silver linings. Were there any silver linings in 2020? Well, a study actually just came out showing that vitamin D deficiency was found in over 80% of COVID-19 patients. What does this tell you? What this tells us is the sun. Choose the sun, not the salt. Dr. Harry Cohen was right. At the end of the day, sunshine, sunlight, hope, positivity, and optimism is everything that we need sometimes to conquer the dark times and the tough times. Well, Mark Masters is saying that, right? Hello from the sunny beach in the United Kingdom. And Tom Morris says, good to see you at the sea. Now that's a Broadway show tune voice. Well, don't quit my day job. And Chip, of course, the day that Corona TV jumped the shark. Always got to be a smart ass, that Chip Griffin. But that's exactly why I love the guy. But enough about you, Chip. Let's focus on other bald men. Let's focus on this week's guest, Josh Bernoff today, Terry Levine tomorrow, Jerome DeRoy on Wednesday. And then on Thursday, the day that I turned 50 years old, December 24th, not one but two wonderful bald men, Seth Godin and Philip Kotler. These guys are young, up-and-coming marketers. Let's give them their big break. Let's give them a chance. I'm super excited for this week. I'm super excited to share my birthday and this time with you. Today, though, I'm super excited to actually meet Josh Bernoff. I mean, we were talking in the green room earlier, and we're basically saying we were aware of one another. He was saying, I've been aware of you. And I said, I've been aware of you too. It's funny how we had never met until today. And just super excited to have this incredible, smart mind on the show with me. My head is hurting already. He's the chief troublemaker of WOBS LLC. What does WOBS stand for? Well, he's just going to have to tell us when he comes on the show. So let's do some birthdays. Mr. C.C. Chapman, fellow crayonista and previous guest on the show. Adam Keats, Eliza Sherman, Paul Greenberg, happy birthday to you guys. Sean Diamond turning 50 as well. Rick Boyko, Jacob, No Fear, Oh Fear, and Andrea Vassalari, showed me just an amazing time when we were in Helsinki together. You wouldn't think that he was, with a name like Vassalari, that he lived in Finland. I don't know if he still does. Sarah Stacer Groves, who I know from the American Airlines days, and Rich Delcor, retired, used to be the CFO of Procter & Gamble. So many people, Kirk McDonald, Bianca Gutt, happy birthday to all of you on Facebook, on LinkedIn, Perry Falkenberg, Rolf Simon, Dan Spano, and Roger Welsh. Hope you guys are just having an amazing day. Well, today's seated soliloquy is called consistency. And it's something I've been thinking about a lot. And it's something that I've also been wanting to talk to you guys about. I just didn't have the right opportunity until now. But, it came out when I was thinking about Josh. Josh has blogged every weekday since 2015. His blog now has over 3 million views. Mark Schaefer, who was on the show last week, has blogged every week for 650 straight weeks now, and he considers it a core piece of his online presence. So is news of the demise of the blog greatly exaggerated? Well, Josh and Mark would say no, but they are exceptions to the norm. They're also both exceptional, so take that as you wish. Today's soliloquy is not to lament on the health and wellness of blogs, although I suspect Josh and myself may do so on the show or even the after show. But instead, I'd like to pick up on what I believe is the most powerful C in marketing, and it's not content, but it applies equally so to it. Of course, I'm talking about consistency. Branding is nothing if it isn't all about consistency. And consistency is without question the most important challenge associated with the mother of all albatrosses to corporations, scale. We all want and strive for consistently good, consistently superior, consistent over-delivery. We all look to avoid consistently bad, consistently inferior, consistent under-delivery. But I would posit that consistently bad is actually better than inconsistency in any way, shape, or form. Many brands have actually built their equity around a consistently low bar, which is often, and in some cases, always exceeded. From Southwest Airlines to the Soup Nazi, from Motel 6 to, quite frankly, McDonald's. But let's get back to content and content strategy for a moment. Previous guest on the show, Mark Masters, said this yesterday to me in a LinkedIn comment. Well done for being the most consistent person out there this year. Well, he probably would have said, well done for being the most consistent person out there this year. And that sounded more Australian. He hasn't actually done too badly himself, by the way, with You Are the Media. I didn't actually think too much of it until I was reading over Josh's blogging track record. And the more I thought about it, the more I understood and appreciated the sentiment. So thanks for the wishes, Mark. What do I win? Well, I guess I win the right to keep going. I win the right to fight and to live another day. I win the benefits of endurance, momentum, experience, and trust. They're often deferred or delayed, but they are absolutely part of the package deal. I win a consistent track record with a whole bunch of proof points, from guest relationships to archived content that I can tap into whenever I need to. I win 2020's Tortoise Award. Slow and steady wins the race. So my message to you today is this: be the tortoise, stay the course, consistently slow, consistently steady, consistently consistent. That is the gift of consistency at the end of the day. Well, now someone who I think, again, is the epitome of consistency, Josh Bernoff. Josh Bernoff is the best-selling author or co-author of 6 business books, including Writing Without Bullshit, Boost Your Career by Saying What You Mean. He works closely with authors as an editor, coach, and ghostwriter, and has contributed to over 35 book projects. He co-authored the Business Week bestseller Groundswell, Winning in a World Transformed by Social Technologies. He was previously Senior Vice President, Idea Development at Forrester Research, where he worked for 20 years. This man, as I said to you, is the epitome of consistency. Let's welcome him onto the show. Welcome, Josh, finally.
It's so great to be here, Joe. Thanks, and thanks so much for talking about consistency, which is, I think, yes, one of my core values.
And it's a little bit of a tongue twister too. But, I was so inspired by reading this about you, and I realized that this is the secret weapon at the end of the day. It's put your head down, it's endurance, it's just keep going and stop getting distracted by everyone around you asking you, what are your numbers and what are your metrics and what is your business model and your monetization?
Yeah. Well, any sane person would not be blogging every day the way I have. Because if you looked at some sort of return on investment from that, it's hard to say that it actually paid off. But when you're going from working for a company for 20 years to being off on your own, you need something to provide rhythm, a way to connect with the people that are important to you. And that exactly is what I was attempting to do by making sure that I write something of value, something interesting every single weekday. And it does provide structure to what I do.
Yeah, but you see, you've already delivered your first insight, your first nugget. You spoke about rhythm. Mm-hmm. And I think like there's muscle memory. There is, rhythm is almost probably the antithesis of atrophy. It's keeping everything moving, and it's probably not a coincidence that there is the rhythm of the waves behind us.
Yeah, I mean, this does create a framework for my life, a rhythm to my life. Every day I am thinking, well, what am I going to write about tomorrow? It might be anytime I have an experience with an author in my work, or I read something, I think, see, that's a potential topic. And that keeps you engaged with the things that are important to your audience. In my case, my audience is writers, and I'm always thinking about, is this thing that I just read written clearly? This experience that I just had being edited, could somebody learn from what happened with me? And that means that my entire life becomes sort of fodder for what's going to appear in tomorrow's session, in tomorrow's blog post.
And that's great as well, because it almost becomes like a Dear Diary, because how can you not want to draw from what happened yesterday, what's happening to you right now, what's going to happen to you tomorrow, what you're planning for? It becomes, I guess, a very dynamic commitment as well.
Yeah, it's interesting. If you were sitting next to me while I worked, you could see the origin of all this stuff, but it's not necessarily that easy to draw a line. So when I write a blog post called that's about, for example, why I knock myself out for some clients, and other clients I charge them the maximum possible amount because they're a pain in the ass, that's because one of my clients was just a pain in the ass to me, and I wanted to make a point about it. But yeah, I mean, that's what happens when your whole experience becomes fodder for hopefully something intelligent to share with the audience.
So that's basically your pricing. Your entire pricing strategy has been now demystified and debunked. It's I charge you more when you are a royal pain in the ass.
Well, that's the hourly rate. I'll actually tell you this little nugget, because people have going into this business say, how do you do your pricing? And I never charge people by the hour, because I think that incents the person doing the delivery to go slower. So this is what I do. I estimate the number of hours it will take. I multiply by my hourly rate. I tell you that's the fixed amount that you will pay for this job, this editing job, writing job, whatever it is. And then it takes me twice as many hours as I estimated. But if you set the rate right, it still works out all right. And you can have a pretty good living.
And by the way, Tom Morris says, consistency comes from Latin roots meaning to stand together. Do my actions stand with my words and with each other and with my highest values? It's never about blindly repetitive behavior. So I think, again, it's you can see it's not just about dynamism and rhythm. It's also about integration, I guess, and a consistency of moral character, of actions and words, of making promises and keeping promises. There's definitely a richness to this little sustained metaphor of ours today.
It's interesting. So when I'm editing somebody, when they've delivered a piece to me and I'm working on it, there's all sorts of things I can say. Your idea is weak. You've buried the lead. You are being repetitive. And we can argue about all of these things. But if I say you've been inconsistent, in the beginning you said this, at the end you said this other thing, or you use verb phrases here, noun phrases here, there's no possible counter argument. I'm always right if I say you're being inconsistent, and you'd really better fix it.
It's amazing how it's like it's actually not subjective at all. It's almost this stake in the ground, this immovable. It's the sword in the stone consistency.
I'll tell you one other thing about consistency, which is sort of surprising. If you are in a situation where you are doing something that's consistently and people are expecting that from you, that gives you the opportunity to deviate from it and find yourself standing out. If you're all over the map, then when you do something weird, it's like, oh, where does that fit in? But consistency is what creates the opportunity to break that rule and stand out in people's minds for what you just did that doesn't fit the pattern.
Oh, I have to I'm just going to stand and look at the waves and take that in. And because it's a great point. You give yourself permission to surprise and delight. That's where it comes from. That's like an epiphany for me, right? Listening to you, because it is the ability to, if you are erratic and all over the map, to your point, I think when you do deliver that surprise and delight, it can often go completely unheard or unseen or unnoticed because of the erraticism, is that a word, erraticism? It is now.
I don't know.
I'm nervous. I feel like I'm being edited right now.
If you had that in your text, I'd have to go look it up to find out whether it was a word or not.
I always ask my guests to deliver some fun facts about them. And for me, this is a treat because I'm getting to know you for the first time. But also everything about you, to me, to be honest with you, is quite fascinating. So the first thing I learned, which is, first of all, this incredible connection with Liberace. I'm learning to play a 100-year-old grand piano that we just convinced to provide a home for. I'm very bad. It's interesting to try and learn something you're no good at just for fun. So how's that going, this little experiment? Are you consistently bad?
No, I am not consistently bad. I am less bad than I was when I started. I am now at the level that most 9-year-olds get after taking some piano lessons. So my wife's family had this piano in the family, and they were trying to find somebody to take it, and nobody would take it. And I'm like, let's have it come to our house. They actually agreed to pay to have it delivered to our house. And I'm taking remote piano lessons with a woman who I went to high school with, and she's been a music teacher for all these years. And yeah, I keep getting better. But I'm not going to impress anybody with what I'm doing. But at this age that I'm at, which is really the sort of fullness of my career is ending here. I want to find new challenges, and this is certainly one thing that's been fun to do.
Well, I'm consistently bad at, or intentionally consistently bad at Photoshop, because here's the next fun fact about you. You walk every day for an hour. This is crazy. You walk every day for an hour, and you start and end at your home, but you walk a different route every day. So I'm thinking to myself, hold on a second. I have two quick questions to ask you. One, do you ever miss a day? And two, have you never walked the same route twice?
Okay, so do I ever miss a day? Yes, obviously, if it's like 11 degrees outside or it's sleeting, I might miss a day. But I'm always checking the weather to see what's possible. It's become a lot harder as it gets to be the winter here in Boston, and sometimes I will substitute some other activity like shoveling snow. But I try to get that in, and it really came because I gained significant weight. At the beginning of the coronavirus episode, I was just not getting any movement, and I finally said, "All right, I have to do this." And it's been good for my back. It's been good for my knees. I carry arm weights, and as a result, it's been good for my elbows and my shoulders. All sorts of problems I was having have now receded as a result of this.
Well, you're looking good, and one thing that is going to not be good for muscles and weight is this consistency of blogging. And obviously, I've alluded to the fact that you've blogged every weekday since 2015. Yeah. But I was actually thinking, like, in all seriousness, when you think about your blogging, when you think about authoring this seminal book, Groundswell, and your final fun fact about the fact that you've been, even though you were trained, I guess, as a mathematician, you always wanted to be a writer. So at the age of 48, you tried to quit your job to write a book. Luckily, the CEO agreed to have you write books for them, and you've now written 6 books. And then, of course, now become a ghostwriter and contributed to so many. So there are a couple of things to unpack there, Josh. The first is you waited until you were 48 years old to eventually write. And then I just wanted to get a little bit of perspective from you in terms of, the chicken and the egg, the blogging versus the writing versus the ghostwriting. There is clearly a common thread, but how does it all come together for you in terms of one that informed the other, that reinforces the other, so on and so forth?
So I should start by telling you that in high school and in college, it was clear that I was pretty good at 2 things, writing and math. And everyone said, oh, well, the math is the thing that's unusual, and so you should pursue that. I actually tried to go to graduate school to get a PhD in math, ended up stopping that and taking my first job as a technical writer. And for 14 years, I was in various writing-related jobs that were connected to math and technology. So I was writing, but I was writing software manuals and stuff like that. When I started to work for Forrester Research, I was writing research reports. But I'd always wanted to write a book, and I finally convinced my wife, got put aside some money, and I'm like, okay, I'm going to quit my job and go write a book. And I have to give credit to George Colony, the CEO of Forrester, for saying, well, why don't you write books for us, which turned out to be a much better setup than if I'd done it on my own. But I've shifted, and since then, I define myself as a writer. Certainly a writer who knows about technology, who knows about logic, who knows about computers and so on. But the thread here is that I'm writing. And so if you look at the blog, that's just an extension of that. It is 1,000 words from me on an interesting topic every day. And that's a way of continuing to hone your craft. And I just have to say this, that there is no more pure pleasure for me than writing. So I'm now at a point in my career where I spend a significant amount of my work doing what I love. And that's a good point to be at.
I mean, great lessons in terms of it's never too late. Discovery look at what we were discussing before. Mm-hmm. I turned 50 in a few days' time. 1 year ago, the concept of a talk show, of a variety show, of being a host, of streaming, not even remotely on my radar. And I think that's got to be a silver lining, to be able to remind people that you're only as old as you feel, and only as old as you allow yourself to feel, that anything really is possible.
I'd like to hope so. I literally, the words I used when I started to write the first book was, if I don't write a book by the time I'm 50, then who am I kidding? So, and the first book was a bestseller. I have to give a lot of credit to Charlene Lee, my co-author, who contributed the majority of the ideas in that book. And then I said, oh, I know how to write a best-selling book. Well, it turns out, no. I know how to write a really good book, and the timing was excellent. So that's how that worked out.
Well, I actually found out that for those people, we think of Groundswell. Why I think this book has been so seminal, like Cluetrain Manifesto, Wisdom of Crowds, is that Groundswell, Tipping Point, it almost became this the strategic blueprint or foundational piece of work for explaining the movement, explaining precursors, right, to Me Too, even to Black Lives Matter, but also this idea of, Victor Hugo once said, there is nothing as powerful as an idea whose time has come. But the other thing, of course, is that a groundswell is not about the ground at all. It's about what's behind me, right? That's a groundswell. I didn't know that.
Yes, it's true. And what I learned as we were promoting the book is that it doesn't really translate into other languages. It's a unique word in English. The Italian title is L'onda anomala, which means the anomalous wave. That's as close as they can get. The what you said about timing is crucial. The things that made that book a good book were it was based on real case studies. We had you learned about the personalities of what the people were doing. It was well organized and had a strong concept in it. But the reason it was a bestseller was because it came out right at the moment that everyone was saying, oh, social media, maybe this isn't just a joke. Maybe we need to think about this for our company. And they're like, oh, wait, there's a book on this stuff. And that's really why it took off, was because of that timing.
Well,
it's probably a good segue into what's happened to social media now.
You think? It was so funny, even the comment on the weekend when I think it was Steve Garfield who posted this, and I said, what perfect timing. I've got him on my show to talk about this, which and this article in the Boston Globe came out yesterday, and you were like, Joe, it's actually why I booked the appearance on your show to coincide with it. It's not just a coincidence. And I said, I am not worthy, oh master marketer. But yeah, let's talk about this. So this article came out yesterday, an op-ed piece that's called Social Media Broke America. But more importantly, the last couple of weeks we've been talking here on the show about social media bad, social media good. Yeah. But there's another part of this, which is here's how to fix it. So take it away. Tell us about the article, set it up, take us through it, and then I will be back to ask you some questions.
Okay. So I'll first of all say this: if anyone's interested in the process of what it took to get this op-ed out this week on my blog, you're going to be able to see the whole behind the scenes on this. But what happened is, after the election, I said, well, this is a great time to talk about how social media crashed the American system of thinking, that it shows liberal stuff to liberals and conservative stuff to conservatives. And as a result, we don't even have the same shared reality. And that's what I mean when I say social media broke America. There's all these proposals now to break these companies up. But if you pry loose Instagram from Facebook, what you have is two poisonous setups, not just one, two different groups that are drawing people toward the extremes.
Interesting.
And so I've been focused on how do you regulate social media companies. I'm not just whining about this is bad, this is bad. It's like, can we fix it? Well, it turns out that in the 60s and 70s and 80s, there was a thing called the Fairness Doctrine, which required television networks to provide a place where qualified representatives of opposing viewpoints could also be heard. And that was because there was a limited number of television networks, and they didn't want to have that monopoly of perspective. Now we have a monopoly of perspective enforced by Facebook and Twitter and YouTube and Instagram. And the solution is similar to what happened with the fairness doctrine. You need to require that these social networks provide free advertising space so that liberal media can pitch conservative members, and conservative media can pitch liberal members, and that may draw the world back together again. That's been sort of ripped apart by these social media companies.
So let's talk about the fairness doctrine for a moment. And I found it quite interesting that it was, I think it was Ronald Reagan who did away with it. But I was thinking, and I've said this, fairly often on the show, which is when we think about Crossfire, the show Crossfire, when we think about Hannity and Combs, at one point, and you can count them in maybe one hand, there were some pieces of content or shows that attempted at least to present some kind of a fair and balanced approach. But that is long gone. And then, you also reference, of course, something that's been in the news a lot, right, which is the whole Section 230 and doing away with that. And I found it quite interesting. I didn't realize that both Trump and Biden want to do away with it.
Yes, well, getting rid of Section 230 will kill social media, because without that liability shield, anyone who posts anything libelous on one of those sites causes the site to be liable for it, and then so you could sue Facebook for having hosted libelous information that somebody posted. So that's not the right thing to do. But so Section 230 should not be free. You should, the government has provided this protection, which enabled these companies to make billions of dollars. And in exchange for it, they need to give something back. What I'm suggesting that they have to give back is this space to allow the sort of cross-pollination of political viewpoints, because the way they're set up now, these algorithms are designed to be as extreme as possible. I should point out that the reason the fairness doctrine existed was because there was a scarcity of broadcast bandwidth, and the enforcement mechanism was if a broadcaster didn't obey it, they could yank the broadcast license. So I'm suggesting something similar here, which is that if these social media companies do not provide this opportunity to bring people back together again, that they'll lose their Section 230 protection, which, believe me, they don't want to do.
So let's draw into this a little bit more, because I think the idea that you've come up with, if I'm interpreting it correctly, is quite brilliant. And it's just last night, or yesterday, I should say, I was a guest on the Beancast marketing podcast, and we were thinking and speaking about the year in review. And we actually, in many respects, spoke about something similar, right? Which is when you look at The Social Dilemma, the Netflix documentary, what you realize is that at the heart of the evil is advertising. Advertising, guess what? Like, surprise, surprise, is responsible for this evil algorithm, so to speak, because money makes the world go round. And I think what you're saying is, hang on a second, what would happen? Seth Godin said, of course, advertising is the tax you pay for being unremarkable, but there's something else going on there, which is, what if advertising now was taxed? But in this case, the tax is more of a public service, which is, to your point, to donate a percentage of media dollars or airtime to, quite frankly, public service announcements, to PSAs. It could be wear a mask. It could be vaccine confidence. And it certainly could be about, especially, with AI and native, the power of native, use all of the tools now to just prepare at least a counterpoint saying you might also want to kind of see this perspective or this point of view.
So I want to point out two things. First of all, I disagree with you about advertising being at the center of the problem, because what is at the center of the problem is the algorithm. What is at the center of the issue is that Mark Zuckerberg and the people who are running YouTube want everything to run without any human intervention. And any human intervention, you know, you have to check to see whether this site is actually obscene that they're linking to, that kind of thing. That slows things up. It's grit in the gears. The advertising is how they make their money from it. But I think if you said we're going to reduce your advertising revenues by 10% and you can keep the same algorithm, those companies would be just fine with that. So I also want to point out what happens if you implement this solution that I've suggested. So imagine for a moment that MSNBC is now told you can advertise to conservatives. They're not going to show exactly the same stuff that they show now that's red meat to liberals. They're going to say, oh, we need to think about what values we share. So they're going to talk about families, or they're going to talk about, where we need to reduce the size of government, things that will appeal to conservatives. And the same applies if you give Fox News space to advertise to liberals. So you end up getting common ideas that we can all share, getting some airtime. And you also puncture these filter bubbles that the people who live and die on Fox News start to see a little bit of a different perspective. So advertising is the solution, and I don't think advertising is the core source of the problem. It is these humanless algorithms.
It's interesting, this tension between technology and therefore automation and the promise/threat of AI, and then this idea of the humanity aspect. You don't hear that counter argument often, but I think also a lot of this comes back to what you believe in, which is the power of the pen. The pen is mightier than the sword. The ability to write, the ability to communicate, and I have to believe that this isn't about video, right? This is about the written word. It's the ability to take the time to read, to process, to digest, to interpret, and to at least make up one's mind for oneself.
Well, there are different ways to get people's attention. One way is to be extreme and to talk about outrageous things. Can you believe what the other side did? But another way to do it is to be eloquent and logical in what you write. And I was delighted after that op-ed got published. I received a direct Twitter message from a very senior political figure. I'm not at liberty to say who it was, but I heard from someone and I'm like, whoa, you want to talk to me about this? And that's because there was the right writing in the right place, written persuasively enough that somebody in that position of power would say, we got to interact with this guy.
Yeah, and it does come down to, part of this argument with social media is that we, Americans, quite frankly, citizens of the world, we're getting so much of our news, our intelligence from these sources. And, the medium is the message, and it is not coincidental that your op-ed piece was not a tweet or even a blog post, but an op-ed in the Boston Globe.
Yeah. It took 3 weeks to do that. And as I'll be talking about in my series this week, after doing all of the research, interviewing people, putting together this extremely carefully argued piece, the editors at the Globe came back and said, this is 2,300 words long, just like you said it would be. Please cut the first 1,000 words. I'm like, whoa. Okay, that's the best part. That's where I quote all of the people. But in the end, they had a perspective that had to be respected, and I needed to address that. And that's that level of effort in writing and quality of argument. There's no substitute for that. No AI is going to be able to write with anywhere near that level of eloquence that happens when writers and editors interact.
It's actually a beautiful contradiction and an irony, right? Which is they could have come back saying, this is so damn good that we're going to give you more space, or we're going to break the rules. And they did the exact opposite, which is to almost, kind of say, great article and everything, but you need to cut some words, because this still had to conform to a template, to a process, to that consistency once again.
Yeah, and I mean, people are like saying, well, printed material is dead, but a lot of people still read the paper in paper, and they said, if this is going to be on the front page of the section, you have to get to the point in the part that's visible on that front page. So get to the point more quickly. And since that's one of my core principles that I talk about in Writing Without Bullshit, I couldn't very well be consistent and say everyone else needs to get to the point quickly, but you should let me have an exception to that.
Don't bore us, get to the chorus, as Bruce Purcell would say. But that's probably a very good segue to something that I've learned so much about, groundswells, about memos. I thought memos were dead as well, but there is actually something called a memo culture, something that exists at Netflix, and something that you've actually trained and conducted workshops with them. And I think, again, it comes back to the importance and the power of format, of process, of templates, of consistency. So tell us a little bit about how important writing is in terms of how companies are run, because I'd never made that connection, which is good or bad writing can actually impact and influence corporate culture.
Yeah, so I learned this. I do these writing workshops for corporations, and it's pretty simple. They hire me, I take some samples of stuff that they've written, I integrate it with the material from Writing Without Bullshit, and then I walk them through how to write more clearly, including what they've done and how that could be done better. But what happened at Netflix was sort of startling, because they not only wanted this writing workshop, but I learned that when you make a decision at Netflix in any sort of strategic situation, the person who wants the decision to get made needs to write one of these memos. And the memo says, all right, here's quickly what we think is wrong. Here's the things that we think should be changed. Here's our evidence for this. Here's what people who object to the things that they disagree about. Not shockingly different, frankly, from the Forrester reports that I used to work on. But everyone there in a position to get a decision made is writing these memos and reading them. So for a company that runs that way, the ability to write clearly is hugely important to their productivity. And in the end, after doing one workshop in person, I did 7 more virtually, as different groups at Netflix said, oh, we heard you're doing this, we want you to do it with our group. And it's interesting, I have talked to other companies that don't use a memo culture. One company I talked to, they're like, well, we're a presentation culture, you have to help us to write presentations more clearly. But that's not as effective, because the memo can do the work even if the person is not present, whereas a presentation isn't going to do that. The only other company I've heard that runs this way is Amazon, and apparently Procter & Gamble also has a memo-centric culture, but most people have not clued into this, and it's not a coincidence that Netflix is one of the most successful companies. I think this is part of the reason why.
It's fascinating to me. And again, when you look at Amazon and you look at Netflix, 2 companies that are all about technology, I think what they're basically, the message to us is quite simple. Sometimes instead of just, getting, trigger, finger happy or trigger finger happy and how quickly we think and send and forward and CC and BCC and get into politics, the ability just to distill thinking, whether it's findings, conclusions, recommendations, into a specific set format and specific number of words allows you to synthesize, to streamline, and organize thoughts into a cohesive format that is, that can be, I think, not just passed around. Bob Farnham says word of mouth marketing again, but it's the ability, I think, for it to be passed around without ambiguity and subjective interpretation.
It's absolutely the case. And we're not teaching people this. I mean, we used to hire people at Forrester Research into entry-level positions. They were, people who were typically very successful in college, and they'd learn to write in college, and they'd come in and they'd try and write something, as sort of a junior person, and you'd be like, no. You were taught to write in the passive voice. You weren't taught to get to the point quickly. That's not the way we do things here. And we had to retrain these people. They were smart, but what they learned about writing in school was just completely wrong. And I think that's part of the issue, is that we've lost the thread of how to get to the point, about how to be persuasive in writing. And that's a tragedy in terms of the level of productivity and the level of intelligence, and the ability to get change to happen among this new generation of people.
Well, speaking of which, we go from the good to the bad to the ugly. I mean, this was like a precision. This was like open heart surgery. How you went in and meticulously dissected every word, phrase, paragraph of a Wall Street Journal op-ed, and I think speaks to, poor writing in this particular case, and that's why in the background you have a little bit of the bullshit bingo background. But I wonder if you could talk a little bit about, in this case, as you put it, how poor writing reveals so much about what's really on people's minds. So an actual portal into their souls, into their intentions, and into their motivation.
Yeah. So when you write every day, one of the main sources of content is to critique other pieces of writing. And I'm often taking apart press releases and public statements. In this case, this op-ed about whether it's appropriate to call Jill Biden with the title doctor was a disaster. The interesting thing is there's actually a case to be made here. Okay. For example, at NPR, they don't use the title doctor with anyone except medical professionals. So you could make that case. But the person who wrote this op-ed, basically, this is written by an old person who's stuck in the old ways of doing things, talking about how it used to be hard to get a doctorate and now it isn't. People used to faint when they were, getting their exams, and now we have people in social science and that kind of doctorate doesn't count. Oh, and then a long diversion on honorary doctorates, which is not at all what Dr. Biden has. So this is what I do. I just, when I do these things, I say, all right, here's what you're reading. Here's what the person's actually saying. And you begin to realize that he's just a sexist who's caught in a 20th century mode of thinking.
Josh, even when you right at the beginning here, when I found this interesting, you said, so I'll just read the first part, which is, Madam First Lady, Mrs. Biden, Jill, kiddo, a bit of advice on what may seem like a small, but I think is a not unimportant matter. Any chance you might drop the doctor before your name? Dr. Jill Biden sounds and feels fraudulent, not to say a touch comic. And it was interesting because you picked up on the word fraudulent. And I think you made a point in a case that was not unintentional. Do you think that when people write, they are choosing their words so intentionally, or it's just laziness in this particular case?
Why can't it be both? I think, if you just have been hoovering up all of this stuff about election fraud, then the word fraud is in your mind and then you just use it. But I don't think it's a coincidence. And remember what I said about my own op-ed. This op-ed should have gotten some editing from the Wall Street Journal, and they either suggested the word fraud or decided that it was fine to leave it in there. But it's sort of offensive, don't you think, to take someone who has a doctorate and say you're a fraud? I mean, I didn't get my PhD in math. I don't get to say I'm Dr. Bernoff. My brother's Dr. Bernoff. My father's Dr. Bernoff, but I'm not. And I admire the people who have that credential. So fraudulent? No, that's a sort of offensive.
But I think there's another implication that comes out of this, which I took away, which is we must choose our words super, super carefully, because if we don't, we ourselves open ourselves up to being taken out of context, losing the benefit of the doubt, and being eviscerated, specifically, guess where, in social media, because of a poor choice of word or phrase.
Absolutely. One of the things I thought was hilarious was that the editors at the Wall Street Journal intimated that there was a conspiracy of people rising up against this op-ed. And I said, well, there's a simpler explanation, which is that if everyone's against you, one explanation is that perhaps you're wrong. Okay. And the fact that everyone could transparently see what a red meat, unfair way of approaching things this was, does not require a conspiracy. All it requires is a bunch of intelligent people all saying, oh, that's really stupid.
I think one of the things that we've discussed on the show quite a bit is this idea of taking criticism and dealing with feedback. Mm-hmm. And I think one of the things that you've certainly, with this discussion about the importance of words and words matter, is also, I think, this reality that it hurts. It hurts when you're being edited. I've never personally, I've never even thought about a ghostwriter for any of my books, mm-hmm. for two reasons. The main reason is that I think I write uniquely, maybe badly, and I just can't let go that loss of control in terms of someone else writing as if they were me or for me. But I guess the other one would be this idea that maybe I'm just a very bad writer. Who knows?
I hope not. I mean, I'd say like half my time now, half my pay time is spent on editing. And I just go in and I'm like, okay, yeah, these are the things that are good, and here's the stuff you need to change. And it's like a reflex for me. This is inconsistent. You've buried the main idea, and help punch things into shape. And my authors consistently are like, wow, that was really useful. That's really helpful. But it wasn't until I got that feedback from the Globe that I realized you put all that work into it, and somebody says, oh, you got 1,000 words there that don't do anything. You want to cut them. That hurts. But the crucial thing about editing is that the editor has to focus on the content and not the author. So if I say this would be better if you change these words and change the way this is organized, then you and I are having a conversation about content, which is fine. If I say you're a stupid, repetitive loser, well, at that point, you just shut down and you're not interested in hearing anything else I need to say. So
well, then we're having a conversation about Twitter, but that's another conversation for another day.
Yeah.
Josh, you've written Writing Without Bullshit, and I find it interesting. It's almost like it's unexpected for me that the great Josh Bernoff can be that irreverent and a little, deprecating or self-deprecating, and your use of the word bullshit. And I wonder why you chose to, listen, I wrote a book called Built to Suck. Why did you intentionally choose the word bullshit? And certainly for me, it immediately conjured up, bullshit bingo, and all the laziness and the cliches associated with the way we write.
Well, when I looked back on all of the written material that I received and edited in the 20 years I spent at Forrester, I realized that there was something to say here to help people to express themselves more clearly. And the simplest way to describe what they were doing wrong was to give it a name, bullshit. People understood that. And my definition of bullshit's a little different. When I say bullshit, I mean any form of writing that does not respect the reader's time and it does not clearly and accurately communicate what it's trying to say. And what's interesting is when I pitched this book to publishers, I insisted that that had to be the title. And the publisher that eventually picked it, I'm like, do you have a problem with that? And they're like, well, we were concerned, and then we read your proposal and we realized it couldn't be called anything else. So it gets people's attention. And I have to say, it's sort of like being in a little ghetto where there are certain things I can't do. I can't advertise my book on Facebook, for example, because it's got a bad word in the title. But it also helps people to understand in a very quick and simple way the kind of things I'm talking about.
And it gets someone's attention, right? I mean, it gets someone's, speaking of which, Tom Morris says, Tom is reading my book right now, and he's written over 30 books himself. So I've been sweating bullets at the moment. He says, Joseph, you're a great, fun, wise writer, but editing, you would be like seeking to control the wind during a hurricane. I am nervous to get all his red lines on my really bad. I write like I talk. There's lots of parentheses, and it's very consistent with my personality. But there's something you said, Josh, that I actually think, really connected with me, and that's your definition of writing bullshit is actually customer centricity or reader centricity. And if you put yourself into the hearts and minds and eyes and brain and time-starved lives of your reader, are you adding value? Again, the bar. Are you exceeding the bar, or are you consistently, under-delivering against the bar? I'll tell you that people have always said to me about my writing, they go, it's almost like I can hear you, like you're standing behind me. I can hear your accent. Funnily enough, Chip is saying, so you write with a funny accent. But I really think that is a great kind of proxy or rubric, which is put yourself in the shoes of your reader. It sounds so obvious, but how much in life is about common sense?
Well, the iron imperative, which is at the center of writing without bullshit, is you must treat the reader's time as more valuable than your own. And when you read something and get annoyed, it's usually because the person didn't put in the time to be respectful of your time as a reader.
It's, that we could probably spend an hour just talking about that, because there is a tendency, I think, for writers, specifically business authors, to almost feel the sense of entitlement. Do you know how much time this took me? How many days?
Who gives a crap?
Years.
Who cares?
Say it again. Who gives a?
Who gives a crap?
There you go. But yeah, and that's when I think maybe the disconnect happens, which is when the writer detaches themselves from that sacrosanct relationship, that intimate relationship with their reader.
Yes. If you're wasting somebody's time talking about yourself, then you have no business being a writer. That's just a simple way to put it. And believe me, I'm often, when I'm editing people, I will highlight a section and just write, who cares? Right? Because that's the point. It's like, okay, why are you talking about this? Who cares?
The classic what's in it for me. Well, we are almost at the top of the hour, and I originally put your quote of the day in with this idea of fairness, coming out of the fairness doctrine, and I look for a quote on fairness. But it's interesting. It almost has validity right now in a completely different context. And the quote is, "Being good is easy. What is difficult is being just." And so do you know who said that?
I really don't know.
Well, I actually quoted him earlier. It's actually another Victor Hugo quote as well. And I think, the obligation we have as writers, the obligation we have as social media influencers to do the right thing, even if it is the hardest thing, I think is something that I take away, and also recognize the power of the pen and the power of words and the power of technology, and an obligation for us, I guess, to figure it out and fix America and fix the world again. But thankfully for all of us, Josh Bernoff is on your side.
Yeah, comes directly to content marketing. If you are helpful, people will want to work with you. If you talk about how great you are, they won't. So whether that means being just or helpful, it really should be at the center of what people are doing when they're writing and creating.
Well, behind us is another radar of a groundswell, but we won't worry about that because we're going to move our groundswell to the Zoom after show in a moment. Before I give you a whole bunch of ways of staying close to Josh, certainly if you're looking for your next book to be ghostwritten, you're looking to understand writing and memo culture, and certainly we could all use it, no doubt. You are the leadoff hitter this week and next week because shortened weeks for the Corona question. Josh, what is the one silver lining, if any, that you'll take away from 2020?
Well, I'm going to answer that on a personal basis. Early in the coronavirus situation, my daughter was quite depressed. And the reason was because she was separate from the person that she loved. And I made the decision to invite that person to live with us. Somebody who's very different from the rest of our family. And there's now 5 of us here, the 4 of us in my family, and this one person who I invited. And that's been an incredible relationship for us all to have. So I think what I learned is that when you're cooped up in a space with a bunch of people and you can't get out much, you can support each other. You can care about each other. You can have a rich experience. And I will never forget this time. It's been a rich and powerful and exciting time for me. So it hasn't been so bad. Luckily, nobody really close to me has suffered from the disease, and I was able to have this experience of sharing our lives with somebody new.
Meaningful relationships, and of course, consistent walks, consistent writing, consistent all round. This has been finally what a pleasure to get to know you. Josh, you were interview number 168 on this adventure of mine. I finally figured out what WOBS stands for. Right?
Yes,
without bullshit.
Without bullshit. Which WOBS you can register with the state as the name of your company. Without bullshit, you can. So they're like, what does that stand for? I'm like, you don't want to know.
Necessity is the mother of invention. You can follow Josh on Twitter. Buy Josh's books, right? Groundswell, Writing Without Bullshit. Read the Boston Globe op-ed if you haven't already. Connect with him on LinkedIn. And finally, if you want to find out more about him and what he does for companies, for individuals, just go to bernoff.com or withoutbullshit.com. Josh, we are going to head on over to the Zoom after show. I just want to thank you again and look forward to continue the conversation. And before we do that, Chuck Norris would like to tell you something.
You are Chuck Norris approved.
There you go. We'll be back tomorrow. Bye-bye.
Thank you for watching Corona TV with your host, multiple author, and global keynote speaker, Joseph Jaffe. Corona TV is the show about hope, positivity, optimism, and if there's time left over, a little bit of marketing. The after show on Zoom starts right now at bit.ly/Corona TV After Show. If you like the show, tell a friend or two. Please subscribe to the show at CoronaTV.show. And if you want to get inside news, previews of upcoming guests, and much more, text Corona TV to 66866 or visit josephjaffe.com/subscribe to sign up for the show's newsletter.
And despite the best ministrations of your wife, you still look ugly.